Welcome back to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, founder and managing director of The Sales Doctor. I'm joined today by somebody I love a great deal. Her name is Dana Walton, and she is the business superannuation consultant for REI Super. Before I introduce Dana and we get into the questions, I asked Dana just to send through a little bit about her philosophy when it comes to selling and the way that she shows up. Here's just a snippet from some of the things that she wrote down from her perspective. She wrote, "Throughout my professional career and personal life journey, I've strived to embody my values and live with purpose. For me, purpose is the driving force behind everything I do. It shapes the person I am and the impact I wish to have on the world. My purpose, to be a beacon of light, hope, support, truth, and joy to everyone I encounter." Now, today's a little bit different because I haven't interviewed yet somebody who's on the front line, somebody who has direct engagement with their customer base. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have Dana join me today. Thank you for being that person, Dana.
Oh, my goodness. I'm just so thrilled to be hearing. And I've got to say that you and I had great interactions in my previous life. And you were such an inspiration to me. I've learned so much from you, and you're right, I'm on the front line. But when I met you, I was sort of behind the scenes and guiding a team. So now I'm back on the front line. I am drawing a lot of inspiration of what I learned from you and what our teams learned from you. And I thank you for that.
Wow, it's such a pleasure. And you're right, Dana. I mean, when we met, you were what was called a BAM, a business area manager at Officeworks for the business team. I think from everything I can see on LinkedIn, the role that you're now in seems to have been custom made for you. And judging by the level of activity on LinkedIn, you've created a very visible presence for REI Super within the property space. Tell us a little bit about your current role, including the elements that are fundamental to your success.
Wow. My role with REI Super, you know what, I look at it and I go, at this stage in my working career, it's a culmination of everything I've done previously. So I've been really, really blessed, to have had some amazing roles throughout my career, both in national companies and also international companies with some great mentors and stuff. But right now where I am is very much about I guess what I've done in the past, and that is to provide education and to provide guidance and to nurture people throughout their superannuation journey. And I think what I find most gratifying about this particular role, going out into the field, like I'm back on the tools. So going out into the field and talking to, crowds of people. It could be, 200 people. It could be 5 people. Now, I don't care. But what it is, it's really about identifying and getting people to identify and understand the role that superannuation plays in their life. And for me, currently, that's what my role is really. It's about going out, embodying what you should do with superannuation, because I am the perfect example of what not to do with superannuation. So for me, it's very much about going out and being vulnerable and talking about what people need to do. So at the moment, that's what I'm doing with REI Super. I think, with all of the roles that I've had, as I say, it's a culmination of all of those roles and what I can do to really create that positive presence, in people and with people who really don't have an understanding of what this really, really important thing is in their life.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I think education is a huge component of selling. And if we're doing it effectively, ideally, we should be directing thinking through the questions that we're asking and for the way that we identify what really
There,
matters to our customers.
there
What
is
would
no
you say
doubt
about
about
that?
that. And, when and I'll just use this role as an example, and I've always done it in all my roles, but you're dead right. Like we need to understand, and you taught me this. You actually taught me this, to be to plan and to have those questions ready and to question with intent. Like, so what is the outcome? What's the outcome we want out of this meeting? What do we want to do? How are we going to arrive at that outcome? Investigate your customers, understand your customers, like what their business is. There's, as we know, there's different stages to the selling process, right? But ultimately, you need to come away so that they feel as though that you're going to, provide them with something that is going to help their business. Right, but you need to be able to understand their business before you can do that. So yeah, you're dead right. It's very much about that understanding and questioning and coming away with your deep understanding, so you can go back with a solution.
Fantastic. I think my work here is done. That's, that to me, questioning with intent and understanding the customer, you're absolutely right. Starting with the end in mind, it's certainly one of the key pillars of any program that I do. But right now, Dane, as we look around, and certainly property's not immune from this, what are you noticing that's changed about the sales landscape?
Gosh, that's such a good questioning. I think I don't know. I've thought about this question. I've really thought about this question, and I think maybe as salespeople we've lost sight of the fact that selling is about people. Like, we really need to understand and want to be curious. We want to understand our customers, but we want to get to know our customers. Like, we need to build that rapport, which is sales 101, but I am just gobsmacked at how many people don't do it, right? We go in, we're impatient, we want the end result straight away, we sort of, go in for the kill, we come away and we wonder why the hell we haven't got that result, right? So sometimes you have to show patience, and, the selling cycle can be long. It can be long. It's not going to always reap you the results straight away. So you've got to show care. You've got to show empathy. You've got to be authentic. People will read behind you. Like, if you're trying to be nice and you're not naturally a nice person, that comes across really clearly. And you know what? I can see it. Like, I'm not a bad salesperson. And when someone is trying to build rapport with me and I know they don't mean it, I just completely switch off. Right? So people buy from people they like. And I think with the change of generations, and the way and we've got it, and generations are changing. Like, some of the decision makers are getting younger and younger and younger, and I'm getting older and older and older. So few laps of the sun happening here. So so we've got everyone's learning, but I mean, ultimately nothing changes, and people buy from people they like, and I think we've lost a bit of sight of that, and I think we have to get back to basics. Understand who our customer is, show a genuine interest in who our customer is, get to know them, and build it from there. And it will start to come. Your customer, and we're all customers of somebody. Everyone's a customer. Everyone's trying to sell to everybody. So when we understand that, and when we know that, it's just such a nice process. And look, I can tell you that most of my best friends now are ex-customers. They're ex-customers because we, like I spent so much time building, and you know what? They're loyal customers. If I was to go back into any industry I've been in, they would come straight to me, right? Because that's that trust, that rapport, that that experience, all that stuff has been built. So to me, I think the challenge is to really remember who our customers are, remember what's important, remember what the outcome is in mind, and work towards that.
Oh, Well, we're going to package that up. There's about 3 or 4 different tiles there that we'll break down, Dana. That will no, it's fantastic because there were so many things that I thought were absolute gold with what you said. You talked about people buying from people they like. You talked about salespeople being curious about understanding what's important to the other person. You talked about, now these are my words, but they came from a previous conversation I had earlier this morning with somebody who was talking about, the fact that we've become very transactional in society, instead of understanding that there will be delayed gratification, and we need to understand that the mutual enrichment isn't necessarily linear. So, we might invest a lot of time and energy into a particular opportunity or a particular relationship, but the rewards that come from that aren't necessarily, from that person or from that one relationship. There might be a multitude of rewards or opportunities that come from that one relationship. And so it's really important that we understand that we need to invest in order, and it's long-term investment in order to reap those rewards. You talked about trust there. You talked about, customers who have come to know you over years of working with each other, who are now friends, but at the same time respect you professionally, so that should you ever be in any other role and it's appropriate for them to be your customer, they wouldn't hesitate to come across with you. That shows a lot.
It's so true. And, like previous to this role, I was in another role with Domain, which is a property portal. So coming across from Domain and working with real estate agents, and I really wanted to stay with agents because I love the vibe, like I love the energy, I love what they do, I respect what they do. And so coming across, there were people that hadn't dealt with REI Super, so they came across, which is really, really nice, and now we're building on that. So it's just the core of liking people. Like, I love people. If you don't love people, you shouldn't be in sales, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that. I think that people who love people do very well in sales, because it's a fundamental baseline. Tell me this though, Dane, from your perspective, do you think it's easier or harder now for salespeople?
I think it's harder. And the reason I say that is I think customers are more wary of salespeople for some reason. They show some degree of wariness and they don't trust them. And let's be real. I'm working with real estate agents. Hey, they're up there with used car salespeople. So I think it's harder, and I think that, and hence what I said before, I think we really need to get back to that. Let's take all of that stuff out. And when I listen to sales training for real estate people, you need to get in there, girlfriend, right? But but when I watch the sales training, it's bringing them back, because the salespeople generally in real estate are young. Like, they're coming out of first-time jobs, like might be Macca's or Kentucky or whatever it is. They're coming out of hospo. Or retail, and they're getting into what they would perceive as being more like a corporate environment. So they're really trying to teach them how to deal with people face to face. A lot of salespeople these days aren't really great face to face because they are younger. And the oldies are fine, like you can really tell, but we're all dropping off our perch. We're all starting to move on. so yeah, no, not you, girl, not you. but it's the young ones. I think it's harder for them because a lot of people when they're buying things, decision makers, there's still decision makers who are still there who might be mid-generation, whatever, and they look at the young ones coming through, and to have that credibility and to be able to look at them and say, well, how would you know what I'm talking about? You have like you've got no wrinkles or whatever. So I think sales generally is a little bit harder, but what isn't harder is the process. So if you have the sales process right, as you taught us in, right, to be well planned, to have your questions with the outcome in mind, right? If you're not planned, if you're going into a sales call and you're not planned, how do you know what the outcome is? You're walking away and it might be lovely. You might have built rapport. That's great. And you still need to do that. That's fabulous. That's the first stage though, right? But you can still ask those questions that you need to and come away with a bit of information to allow you to then request a second meeting. Like you've got to have that planning. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So I do think sales is harder. I think it requires more work. I think the young ones need to work a different way because it's not just this. You need to get out in front of people and get to know people so that they get to know you, and the results will come. But you've got to be patient. It is a process. So I personally think sales is harder.
Yeah, I think it is harder. I think there's so much that is going to continue to be hard too. I mean, when you've got a market that's starting to turn down, and budgets are tighter, and there's a little bit more challenge to the buying process as well. There's more risk riding on some of those decisions to buy, regardless of the industry. And then when you couple that with not even entry-level sales skills, any level of sophistication about communication, let alone having an outcome-driven conversation, let alone having an ability to direct thinking or thought towards a goal, or really being able to elicit what the drivers of the buyer are and what their fears are, what they're trying to avoid, what they're trying to achieve. It's a combination or a recipe really for trouble, I think. So what do you think is the response? So given that we've got, younger people coming through, and for those of you who are only listening to the podcast, when Dana said, as opposed to this, she was demonstrating, being on a phone, texting. When you've got that generation coming through, Dane, and they're green, and then they're thrown into a hard market, what do you believe the responsibility is for employers to be able to arm their people, especially their frontline salespeople, with the right level of skill?
I love this question, and it's fraught with danger. Look, when you've got, it's all about. Obviously, it's all about training. That's great. I think you've got, when people are bringing new, regardless of who they are, like, when leaders are bringing in their new team, they've got to, recruit and to interview and make sure they get the right people. It's all about attitude, isn't it? It's not necessarily about skill. It's about attitude and a will to do it. Right? It's the will, and it's the want to succeed, and it's the want to be part of that culture and that team. So I think that's the very, very first part. Once you get your right people on board, then it's about really, like we say, it's about having the support mechanism there to make sure that they're not on their own, because it's amazing how many businesses recruit and then leave. Leave them to do, like, right, you're right now, you go off and you do whatever you want to do. And it's just not the case. People need guiding and nurturing and mentoring in a new role for, at least in my you at least 12 months, like a buddy system, someone who is really well versed and really, experienced, and you want to set them up for success. And when you're giving people new roles with targets, let's face it, we're in sales. They're going to have targets, right? They might be given a little bit of leeway, 3 months maybe, and then they're going to have sales targets. So you want to make sure they're set up for that success. And if it's not working, if something's not working, then we guide and nurture them through. So I think that real understanding of how difficult it is for them to come into a new business, making sure that they've got the right people around them to set them up, making sure they're, constantly, there's one-on-ones, there's coaching in the field and all the rest of it. I think it's just hand-holding, and that doesn't happen a lot. Like I see it in real estate a lot, where, someone comes in and it's like, right, here's your group of customers, out you go, right? And, the more experienced, well-established, successful brands aren't doing that. They're actually stepping away from the old school and moving into that nurturing and making sure that they feel okay. I think what we do is we, as leaders, we can take things for granted, and again, people deal with people they like, and when you're going into a business as a new employee, it's really important that the induction period, like the induction process, is really good. And the person that interviewed you, they join a business for a reason. And that's because the person that interviewed them has resonated with them and created some sort of excitement. And you need to keep doing that, because unless you keep doing that, and they feel on their own, then they'll just keep moving around, and it's expensive for employers, and it's not great for the employee. So, you want to make sure that experience is well-rounded.
I couldn't agree more. It's also not great for the customers either when people move around. It sort of sends the wrong message about the organisation. It sends the wrong message about their level of trust that they can have in that organisation. There were a few things that you mentioned that I think are worth doubling down on. You said that, in that recruitment phase, to be looking out for attitude over skill, because I think you're right, because attitude's not something that you can train for, but skill is. And if somebody has the right attitude with enough dedication, as long as they've got the will, which you also mentioned, then you can train that. If they've got a want to succeed, then training's only going to benefit them. You talked about, not just recruiting them and leaving them, but you talked about some really very practical things that businesses can do. Okay, yes, training's great, but when budgets are tighter and the training budget might be really tightly held, what else can businesses do? Well, you gave us some great advice here. You talked about a buddy system. And when you've got more experienced people who are really comfortable in their own skin, who have a proven successful track record, and then you've got these, green newbies starting their sales career and buddying them up together, there's a lot of benefit that can come from learning by watching models of excellence, by that person, the mentor's development as well. They get leadership skills by being in that sort of program. So there's that cross benefit, I think, for an organisation. But you also talked about a proper induction program. What's been best practice that you've witnessed around, good induction programs that have really set those salespeople up to win? It might not have been a really comprehensive program, but it's been that start of a journey for those salespeople.
One of the best induction programs I've been through was with an overseas company. And it was very much about being introduced to all of the main pillars of the business. So where everybody's sat. So as a salesperson, like, what does this mean when I'm doing this? What does the information that I'm actually doing or providing, where does that go? And how does that affect that business unit? So, it sort of reinstilled the importance of the intricacies of what I was doing as that new salesperson. So it was understanding the core of what the business was first. Once I understood that, then it was moving into, okay, so who are our customers? Right, talk to me about our customers. Who are our customers? Where does your role sit? Right, so this is where your role sits. This is what our expectations of you are. Right, each customer sits into these in these different pillars. This is where your expertise is going to add to the value of the company. So that was really fantastic. And all of this all ended up flowing in together. So once the induction was done, it made perfect sense in my simple mind, right? So it was understanding the business at large, right? What are the pillars of our business? What part does your role have in the pillars, right? And how does your contribution really affect other people in our company, right? So it's really important that you perform your admin part of the role well, right? Then who are our customers? What does that look like? What are the intricacies of those customers? Who are you going to be looking after? Who are you going to be looking out for, right? Then who are your colleagues, right? Where do they sit in the whole scheme of things? Who are the personalities? What do those personalities look like? I think you're going to get on really well with this one, this one, this one, and this one. You might need to get on better with this one, this one, and this one, depending, totally on the dynamic of the teams and all the rest of it. Right, this is the person that you're now going to be working with for the next 6 months. They are going to buddy up with you, right, for 5 days a week for the first 3 months. Then after that, you're out on your own, right? But then you'll be having weekly meetings with that particular buddy. And then it was also meeting once a month. There was very clear communication and instruction from the leader. Yeah, it was a process. So very much about that. And the expectations were clear. Like, it was very clear about what I had to do. There was very clear communication. There was no room for any misinterpretation of any of the expectations. So it was really great. And then, after that, it just sort of started to flow. It started to flow. So I think from a induction point of view, also the feeling of being able to have open communication with anybody. If I was worried about anything, if I wasn't feeling comfortable, I could go to my leader about anything, and I had that relationship with them. So yeah, it was great.
Wow, there's a lot there that, again, really did set you up well to succeed. One of the things that jumped out at me was the clear pathway. So these are all of the stages of progression from day one through to the first 3 months. So I thought that was really very beneficial, so that people kind of know where they need to land along that journey. But you mentioned something here, and I just want to talk about this for a moment. You talked about clear expectations, and while you and I think that's a given, my experience is that it actually isn't. And when I ask people to describe what it is that they need to achieve, or tell me what the purpose of their job is, especially when there's a lack of performance, that's one of the first questions that I ask, because it tells me that they're not clear, that there hasn't been a set of expectations clarified around what I need to do, when I need to do it by, and the expectation about the type of delivery in order to get that. When that's not clear, that's where people make it up. And they go about, it's not because they don't want to succeed. It's not because they don't want to do the best they can. But without those clear expectations, people fill in the blanks. And unfortunately, they can take a really long time to come back to where they should have been in the first place had there been those clear expectations. You're nodding, Jane. Talk to me about
Furiously.
that.
And the reason I'm nodding furiously is because I'm going through that right now at my ripe old age. My current senior leader is doing that, right? So it's very much about in the past has been the past. So we've been building. I've only been with REI Super for 12 months.